Okay. Hi to everybody. First of all, again, thank you for joining me this evening, and I apologize for the so close to the Seder, so close to all the cleaning that we're involved with right now. But it was either tonight or tomorrow night, which is Badikas Chumetz, which I'm sure would be much more stressful. I want to thank, first of all, those people who helped sponsor this evening's shir. Some were in Refuah Shleima to, first of all, to all of Klal Yisrael, all those who have been affected by any illness, but specifically this most current one, and also Rachel Bas Altachaya, Pinchas Michal Ben Dorothy, and also Zecher Nishmas Pesach Yeshua Ben Tova Chaya, Nisan Reuven Ben Shammai, Lorraine Shah, Yaakov Yitzchak Ben Yosef. The official title of tonight's shir basically is Haggadah in Crisis. Haggadah itself is not so much in crisis. On the contrary, in the sense that Haggadah has probably been no more real than it is right now at this point in time. And just as a backdrop, first of all, that it's uncanny because that it should come so close to Pesach. It could have happened any time of year. The fact that it happened at this time of year is very significant because the message that we're getting out of this, that seems to be emerging. There's still more to come. We don't know where it's going. We don't know the final results of everything, what the final message will be, whether this is in fact the final threshold to the Gula Shlema, or whether it's just another threshold to another stage before the final redemption. But basically, it's very similar. The message of the Haggadah and Pesach, we've never, in the last 50, 60, 70 years, certainly in the course of my life, we've never been in a situation where the actual message that the Haggadah has to teach us matches or parallels what's going on in everyday life at this point in time. The Haggadah makes one specific message, or gives one specific point and gives over a very particular message. The whole thing is basically geared to teach us something very important about the whole concept of freedom. We sit down in general year after year, Baruch Hashem, it's a family event. We enjoy. The cleaning itself is difficult, but it's part of the process, part of the enjoyment. No pain, no gain. Certainly applies most by this Chag, because the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. That's for sure. And it's a time for family. It's a time for the little children sing manishtanas and everything, and a lot of pleasure from everybody that come to the Seder and joins together. And usually it's an event that people look forward to all year round. This year is different, of course, because the families are not able to come together. But the message of the Haggadah gets lost. Believe it or not, we go from section to section, and we try to take in whatever we can, but the overall message that the Haggadah comes to teach us is something that Maharal points out based upon the whole concept of matzah, which we'll get to, B'ezras Hashem, hopefully, and that is poor people are free people. If you had to sum up the Haggadah in one thing, poor people are free people. Now that rubs against our grain, rubs against my grain, makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to hear what that's not my lifestyle. That's not where I'm heading. I may not want to be a multimillionaire, although if it came easily, I would turn it away, right? But certainly, Gashmias, materialism, that's part of our lifestyle today. Because Baruch has blessed us. We've had so much of it over the last little while. And we know that our religion, Judaism, does not preach that money is the root of all evil. It can cause a tremendous amount of evil, but lots of things do. And we don't hold to that concept. So what does it mean that poor people are free people? This is what the Maharal stresses. This is the concept. This is what the matzah represents, the idea of lechem oni. The play in the word itself, lechem oni, means the bread that everyone answers around. It's the source of the questions, the answers, but also poor man's bread. That's what we read about every single year. And it's a lot more than simply a commemoration of what happened a long time ago back in Mitzrayim. Avraham Avinu ate matzah hundreds of years in advance of the first Seder, because matzah is a concept Kabbalistically represents tremendous tikkun, tremendous rectification for the world. And the fact that it's associated with this idea of poverty is very, very important, and an idea that has to be explored. The good news, in case you think you're turning off right now because you don't want to hear how this is going to end up, the good news is not what it sounds like. It doesn't mean that you have to basically go out to the street and start having a garage sale and getting rid of all your possessions, or simply giving them away, or being mafka them and canceling those orders that were in the mail on the way to your place to enhance your life. It doesn't mean that specifically. There is an aspect that is true about that, but it's not the main point what the Haggadah means when it says that poor people are free people. There's more to this idea, which is essential, which is what we're actually finding out every single day as we battle and deal with this particular crisis called the coronavirus. So what it comes down to, again, in summation, what this idea basically means is that the fundamental difference between the Jewish people and the rest of the world is supposed to be that when it comes to Klal, when it comes to the Jewish people, physical pleasure is never the goal. It may be a byproduct, a wonderful byproduct. You're allowed to enjoy things. I mean, Shabbos is the best example of all. Pesach is coming up. We have beautiful dishes and delicious food. We enjoy our clothing too, and jewelry, and you name it. But the goal of life is never the physical pleasure. It's the spiritual goal, the spiritual accomplishments. The physical is a means to the spiritual, to accomplish what we have to become, ultimately speaking, in terms of our own personal lives, over the course of many Gilgulim. And the rest of the world, they're allowed to make physical pleasure the goal. They want to be spiritual, fantastic, it's to their advantage, but they have no hechrach, there's no obligation, no achrayus for them specifically to pursue spirituality. If they want to enjoy the physical world, they want to pursue physical wealth, that's okay, that's fine. But the Jewish people are different because, as the Gemara points out, we're going somewhere. We're going to the world to come. That's our goal, Olam Haba, the ultimate world. That's where the pleasure is supposed to be for us. That's the concept. The concept is that we're going to get rewarded there for all the sacrifices we make down here. It doesn't mean that you have to live an ascetic life where you cut yourself off, but it means that whatever we're doing, first and foremost in our mind, is the idea that we're accomplishing spiritual goals. The Torah comes to direct us to bring out the most of our potential and our best us that we're supposed to be working on through the course of our life. And if you look at the last 50, 60, 70, maybe 80 years of Jewish history, it seems that Pesach has become more a celebration of the materialism, of the physical, not so much the spiritual. I mean, it always bothered me personally. Every year, it's the time of our freedom. It's the time we're supposed to break free of what? What are we breaking free of? We're not in Mitzrayim per se, although that's not so true either for that matter. And we go in and the Seder is measured by how much fun you had, how well the children sung Manish Tanah, how long you stayed up that night and recounting the story, and and eating your afikomen by chatzot and not by chatzot, and then it's over. And then you go into Chol Moed and you go into your tiyulim, and then it's Shri Shal Pesach, and the Chag is over, you put all it away. And freedom is man cherus senu. What cherus? What were we achieving? What was the cherus we were trying to accomplish? Not much for most people. We are in Galus 3,320 years after leaving Mitzrayim, because we've been trying to complete something that began back then in Moshe Rabbeinu's time, and has been hanging, in the air the entire time, because no generation has been able to live up to the obligation and the responsibility to finish the process. So as we go further and further away from Har Sinai, further and further away into Galus, we lose the capability to be able to do things like that. And eventually it gets to the point where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to do it for us. He has to direct us. He has to create a momentum, a situation, an environment that imposes upon us what we should be imposing upon ourselves in order to be able to accomplish what we're here to accomplish. And just incidentally, it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's pure speculation, but when people started talking more about this virus, coronavirus, everything obviously is hashgacha pratis. Everything is meant to teach us something. And if the newspapers or the doctors or the government is koveya they establish this is how we're gonna call this thing. We're gonna talk about it this way. Then that becomes the operating word or principle, and we can work with that. And the fact that it's called Quran, if you read it in Hebrew, right, it's very similar to the word Karen. And what was interesting about that is because that became apparent to me the very week that Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Mount Sinai with Karnei Hod, right, the beams of glory, and he had to wear a mask. And they're talking about wearing masks. Again, pure speculation. I'm not saying at all this is what that means, but if you're a thinker and you're wondering and you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to talk to us through Hashgacha Pratis, through divine providence, so he leaves clues. We're going to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why did you just spring the redemption on us? And Hashem's going to say, I didn't spring it upon you. I was giving clues for 10, 20, 30, 40, 60 years, right? For the longest time, I was trying to tell you where I was going, what I was doing with this. And, in the end, you didn't pay attention. So we pay attention. That's the goal. That's the idea. So the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the word Karen is a word that does show up often in Torah and in Tefillah, right? That's Karen Yeshua. We talk about that as Shemona Esrei, Yeshua, the power, the horn. Where's the word Karen come from? The word Karen comes from a shore. It comes from a shofar. It's a Karen. It's literally a horn. That's what it is, right? And the Gemara says that it's actually the symbol of Malchus based David, because it says that any of the kings who were anointed using a Karen, using the actual shofar horn, basically, that was their kingdom, their Malchus would last forever. But Shaul and other kings, the kings of Israel who were anointed with oil using just a pach, just a jar, their kingdoms were temporary. So the Karen represents the longevity. Where we get it from Hannah, right? Because when she was davening for a son, and Eli came into the Mishkan and saw her and thought at first she was drunk, and she explained to herself. So she says in the end that that you should the horn of David and Melech should be elevated, and we actually were koveya at Simach Davedecha in the Shemona Esrei based upon her words. So the word Karen itself represents the whole concept of Geula, and she was saying before she even had a son and before David and Melech was even born that I know through prophecy that there will be David and Melech, and if I do have a son, let it be that he's the one who anoints with a Karen David and Melech. And he did in the end. It's a nice story in Shmuel. It's worth looking at the story in Shmuel, how the whole thing happened, right? So the whole concept of Karen that was interesting was that someone sent me a picture of a kamea. Kamea is like an amulet. We don't do them so much today, but once upon a time we did. And an amulet was something the Gemara speaks about, that certain people were experts at arranging words in such a way, Kabbalistic, it's all Kabbalah, of course. And certain amulets had curative effects. You could wear an amulet, it would cure something. And if it cured something 3 times or 3 different people, then it was known to be an expert amulet. And that one could be even worn on Shabbos because it was considered to be in a Rosh Rabbi, a place you can't only carry something because of the fact that it had such a metzias, such an ability to cure somebody. And there was an amulet written, apparently, I don't know which plague it was, but there was a serious plague in Jerusalem at some point in time, and there was a 14-word amulet, and in this amulet, one particular word shows up twice, against the Magef, against the plague, and it's spelled Kuf Reish Vav Nun, Karon. Again, speculation. I can't say I know exactly what that means. I can't say it's tied to this whatsoever, but again, we're looking for connections. We're looking for something that we may be able to learn out of it and take to heart. So everyone can do their own thing, what they feel, what they there's plenty of videos on YouTube all over the place trying to find meaning what's going on today. But this might represent the concept. This is a precursor to redemption, to Gula, the time that Mashiach will come, because the whole concept of Karen represents the idea of Malchus. Why is it so important? Why am I bringing that in right now? Because if that's the case, then there's not a lot of time left, and it would explain why we're going through right now. Nothing changes people faster and more convincingly than Pachad Mavis. The Jewish people, in the 10th plague, sat there making the Seder. You know, we look in the Haggadah and the Korban Pesach and the halachas and all that, but just like in the story of Yosef and his brothers, when the brothers sell Yosef, you hear nothing. No shouting, no crying, no screaming. They put him in a pit, they take him out, right? They judged him, they sold him. And you know, you don't hear anything about what Yosef was feeling at the time. Later on, when Reuben says, you know, that when he was crying, this is all happening to us because when he was crying, he was screaming, and he was like begging for mercy, we didn't pay attention to him. So now, you know, so all of it, that's the first time we get a chance to hear what's really going on. The same thing, you read the Haggadah. The Haggadah is a structure. It's almost like a table of contents. It's a Roshei Prakim in a sense. You just can't go by Haggadah itself. You have to put yourself into it. You have to go into it. You have to understand and add the emotions to it. That's our job. The Haggadah is adding, you know, giving us the structure, the direction, the derech to go. But it's our job to put the emotions into it. The emotions that are applicable, not our own personal emotions, what we're feeling right now. I got a brand new suit. I feel fantastic, and I love this wine. It's semi-sweet and amazing charosas. You know, that's our emotions. We're supposed to make it real to ourselves. Try to imagine what it was like lying around having a Korban Pesach by listening to the stream outside the window, screaming as the angel of that actually Kodesh Baruch himself, right, went around killing all the firstborn. And it was a shocking experience, an overwhelming experience for everybody. Pachad Mavis changed the way that people looked at reality and prepared them for redemption. And one of the most mind-boggling things for me personally, it's been very hard to get my head around it, is how this thing, you know, spread so quickly, but not just that, but how the governments in unison responded so quickly as well and emphasized the danger. And obviously there's people, there always will be people, who won't take these things seriously. 4/5 died in the plague of darkness because they didn't take it seriously enough to leave Mitzrayim. We're always going to have that. The Gemara says the same thing's going to happen in the Yemos HaMashiach too. But the way that we responded to actually stay indoors, and how the shuls and the rabbis together agreed the bigger mitzvah was not to go to shul and make minyanim, you know, and to be too close to people, and literally almost shut down religious life, buying things for Pesach, you know, getting people to have to clean, having family come together. It's like literally stripping everything apart, bare bones to a large degree. So that is probably one of the most useful tools in a sense, because it's what we should be doing on our own, and we'll see what that means in a second, Mr. Hashem. But the main idea, you know, well, put it to you this way, okay? We say every day in the Shema, at least twice a day, V'ahavta Hashem l'kecha, v'chol levavecha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol me'odecha. There are those who say that v'chol nafshecha, v'chol levavecha was the first 2,000 years of history. History is supposed to be 6,000 years long. V'chol levavecha, it was about the heart. People involved in Avodah Zarah, Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted people to connect to him, to see the emes, to see the truth. The second 2,000 years, that was called the period of Tohu, of chaos. The second 2,000 years is called the period of Torah, right? V'chol nafshecha, with all your life. That's what we see. Rabbi Kiva and all the 10 martyrs and Kama V'Kama, Yehudim, who had to sacrifice their lives, v'chol nafshecha, their soul, to be able to make the point to Kodesh Baruch Hu that we love you, we're devoted to you, and we're loyal to you, right? This is what a Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted to see from us. The last 2,000 years, from 4,000 on until Mashiach comes, the Chol Me'odecha, with all your possessions. What does it mean? We're back to the same theme. We're back to the same idea about how spiritual goals have to be the priority. That's what it says. So what does that mean exactly, right? What's the concept? The lesson points out something, again, that we take for granted. A couple of things that we take for granted, but one specific point. He mentions that, you know, what was the point of the 10 plagues? What was the point of the 10 plagues? It's simple, to destroy Mitzrayim. Because Baruch Hu brought the 10 plagues to the Egyptians to destroy them. That was the whole idea. That's what God says to Moshe. I'm going to humble the Mitzrayim, and when we're finally, you should know, by the way, the first one's not going to work, the second one's not going to work, the third one's going to, they'll be impressive. They'll become increasingly more impressive as time goes on, right? But not until the 10th plague, Makas Bechoris, will Paro finally say they can go. Truth is, he wanted to say by the 5th plague, because Baruch Hu hardened his heart, so he couldn't say go at that point in time. But by the 10th plague, so Moshe was warned in advance, and that's where the whole thing plays out. So Lesha points out, we're talking about God over here. We're not talking about governments or scientists who don't know the full extent of what they can accomplish with something. So they do testing. Maybe this will work, maybe this won't work. We'll just try right now with the vaccination, right? With the vaccine. They're trying to try this. Does this work? Not necessarily. How about this? What's the effect? We don't know. Because Baruch Hu knows exactly what he's doing and the impact it's going to have. That's clear. That's it. So therefore, says Elisha, one plague would have been enough. Never would have been enough. Bring one plague, and that would have destroyed the Egyptians, at least enough that the Jewish people could have gone out and left Mitzrayim, and maybe they wouldn't have been the 4/5 who died in the plague of darkness, because everyone would have gone at the same time, and it would have happened so quickly. And that would, so what was the point of the 10 plagues? What was the point of the 10 plagues? Why did God do 10 plagues specifically? So to appreciate the answer to that question, we're always told that we eat matzah because the Jewish people didn't have enough time to bake bread. And the reason they didn't have enough time to bake bread because the Kodesh Baruch Hu pushed them out of Mitzrayim. And the reason why Kodesh Baruch Hu pushed the Jews out of Mitzrayim is because they were holding on Mem Teshari Tuma, the 49th level of spiritual impurity, and if they stayed one moment longer, they would have sunken down to the 50th and become irredeemable, and that's the end of Jewish history right then and there. Because Baruch Hu promised Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, he would redeem the Jewish people. So therefore, Hashem had to make good on his word, and what did he do? He basically, sent Moshe, who had been down to Mitzrayim early, to take them out while they still could be redeemed. But by the time the Jewish people are leaving Mitzrayim, the night of Makas Bechoros, they're still holding on Mem Teshari Tuma. They're still holding on the 49th level of spiritual impurity at that time. How's that possible? Spiritual impurity was down. It was broken. Pharaoh was a broken man. Kulanu Mesim, we're all dead people. Get rid of these people now, the Egyptians tell Pharaoh. Because if they stay longer, there'll be nothing left of Egypt. So spiritual impurity was completely broken by Leil Seder in Mitzrayim. And the Jewish people, Pharaoh's going to Mitzrayim, apparently wearing his pajamas, looking for Moshe, a very embarrassing scenario, at least, right? To tell them to go. He can't even get dressed. He's so rushed to push the Jewish people out, proving that spiritual impurity at that point in the whole process was broken, on the verge of destruction, and Kedusha and the Jewish people way up here. If that's the case, then why did we have to bake matzahs? Why wasn't there enough time to bake bread? If we have time, we'll come back to that question. The main point's not that. The main point is that the 10 plagues were not for the Egyptians. One plague would have been enough. The 10 plagues were for the Jewish people. For the Jewish people. Why? What was the point of that? So the Leshem explains, and the Pri Tzedek concurs, and it certainly makes a lot of sense. And that is that when Moshe Rabbeinu went down to Mitzrayim, that's when the Jewish people were on the 49th level of spiritual impurity. At that point, there was almost nothing left to save. But as each plague began to occur, first Makas Dam, first the snake, the staff turning into snakes, that was a little bit less impressive because the Egyptians did the exact same thing. Even the kids did the exact same thing. And Moshe grew up in Paro's house, so he knew magic. But as each plague, occurred more and more, the Gilui of the Shechina of God increased. It increased. And as it increased, the Jewish people had a refuah. A person becomes ill, the doctor prescribes a course of medicine to help the person start with this and work with that, and as you get better, and you work yourself out of it until you finally are cured, finally are healed. So the Jewish people could not go to redemption right away. It's a mentality. It took time to heal them, to cure them. So what did Hashem do? He started with a little bit of a gilui, of a revelation of Hashem, increased the revelation, each plague, till finally by the third plague, even the Egyptians have to admit it's the hand of God. They call it the finger of God, but the hand of God. And as it gets more and more increased, the Jewish people become more and more spiritual. So finally, by the Makkos B'chayris, the Jewish people were cured. Enough, right? Those who survived, 4/5 died in the plague of darkness, but the 1/5 that did survive, the enough of a refuah, once Hashem himself did, the Gili was unbelievable. It was tremendous. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, there was no Bechira that night. It was Yemos Mashiach. The night of the plague of the firstborn, it was Yemos Mashiach. The enemy was broken. Hashem revealed himself. There was no need for a seminar to prove the reality of God. There was no need to have to prove the validity of Torah. It was clear because Hashem was doing all this. The miracle was so outstanding that everybody lost their Bechira temporarily. They got it back later on. You see this at the Kvetch after they leave by Yam Suf and all that. But for the time being, at that moment, as they did Korban Pesach, according to Targum Yonasan, they were even transported somehow to Harabayas to do the Korban Pesach. It was a special, unique evening and opportunity. So that was the point of the play. So what's really going on? When Adam HaRishon was first created, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought all the animals to him to name them, the Torah tells us, right? And then everything he called, whatever he named it, right? An elephant, called a peel, whatever, a coffin, a monkey, whatever he named it, the biblical names, the Torah says that was its name. Why? Because he was able to see into the animal. He had the power of a divine vision to understand the essence, the concept behind every particular animal. And therefore, he was able to name it precisely based upon what its nature was. So then the Medrash says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned to Adam HaRishon and said to him, he said, okay, and what are you going to call yourself? So he said, Adam. Call myself Adam. Why? Because, first of all, I was taken from the Adamah, and this way I'll never forget where I came from, even though I'm like you in so many different ways, but my body comes from the ground, even though he was so spiritual, it says it was almost like light at that point, but the whole world was like that. And second of all, it's a tziruf of two concepts. The word Adam is a combination of two things, Aleph and Daled Mem. Now the Aleph is always an allusion to Hashem because the word Aleph, Aluf, means a chief. The Aleph itself is one, the corresponds to number one, which of course Baruch is always called one. And the Aleph itself is made up of a Vav and then two Yud, one on top and bottom, which is a gematria 26. Yud plus Vav is 26, alluding to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the Aleph represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore the Aleph of Adam represents the chelik, the portion of Hashem in us, which of course is our neshama, our soul. So the Aleph represents our neshama. The Daled Mem spells the word blood. And blood, for all intents and purposes, represents the physical element of man. That's, it's the lifeline, it's the life flow of a person. And as a result of that, when we see blood, we feel like life is slipping away. It scares us because we know we can't live without blood, even though we have legs and arms and a torso and a head. But the blood represents the physical aspect of a person. So Adam was saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since I am a combination of a body made from the ground, but a soul that comes from you, I'll call myself by that combination, and therefore I'm called Adam. Now, a generic name that applies to everybody. Yes, in principle, in potential, yes, but not in actuality. It's something that a person actually has to live up to develop. The concept actually is called in Kabbalah an Adam Shalim, a complete person. The Arizal speaks about this in Shar Gilgulin, what it means to become an Adam Shalim. What's an Adam Shalim? An Adam Shalim is when the person is completely an Adam, a complete Adam. How does that happen? It happens when somebody is able to strike the perfect balance between the Aleph and the Dalet Mem, between the physical and the spiritual. So it turns out that every single plague, the Jewish people are holding on Mem Teshari Tuma, the 49th level of spiritual impurity. What is that? That's the Dalet Mem. That's the dam, right? That's the blood. That's the physical. That's the materialism. That's Egypt. Egypt is as materialistic as you can get at that time. It represented the Yetzer Hara, according to Kabbalah. Man's evil inclination. People did what they felt like doing, no matter what the cost. That's just the way the world was at that time. So when the Jewish people were first found by Moshe, when he first went down there, they were connected. In fact, as the Medrash points out, that when Moshe said to the Jewish people, finally, after the 9 plagues, and said, in this month, the month of Nisan, you're going to go out from Mitzrayim, the Jewish people complained and said, it's not possible. How can we possibly go out? There's only 2 ways to leave Mitzrayim. Number 1, we have a strong army, and we beat the Mitzrayim back, which we don't have. The second thing is we have fantastic miracles happen for us, which is not going to happen, because big miracles require big merits. And this country is nutunaf, is dirty from our own avodah zarah, our own idol worship. That's how Moshe found them. That's how Moshe found them at that point in time. That's the Dalet Mem. You can't go out. You can't go into freedom. Freedom is not about just simply leaving slavery. Freedom is there's lots of people who get out of jail and they're still not free. They're free of the jail, but they're still not free as an individual. The Haggadah comes to teach us the whole concept of bechira, of freedom, of what it really, really means in the end. What is true freedom? We are enslaved. Every year, we don't experience the cherus that the Haggadah comes to help us achieve, to teach us about, because we missed the point, we missed the concept. Every plague that Hashem brought in Mitzrayim specifically came to heal the Aleph of the Jewish people, to expand it. Now, here's what happens. If you keep doing this, you keep feeding the Aleph. And I'll give you a very, very simple example. I've watched this happen many times. I was in the yeshiva that did a lot of outreach, a lot of kiruv, and we were, it was Torah in the old city, and it was very common for people to be brought up from the kotel, to sit across from someone to talk for an hour, and then maybe have lunch, and maybe they'd stay, maybe they'd go, and you work with the person. And you see these guys come in with ponytails and earrings and torn jeans, and you look at the guy, you size the guy up, and he's looking very materialistic. Doesn't look so spiritual. It might be spiritual somewhat, but not Torah spiritual per se. It's unusual. They have that kind of a combination at the same time. And you talk to this person, you reach him maybe a little bit. The right words at the right time with the right divine providence. The guy decides to stay for 2 classes. He stays for second class, he stays for lunch. He talks to somebody at lunchtime, and they get into a discussion, maybe even an argument, and the person makes some good points, and the person realizes he should stay. But in my case, my Rosh Hashiva was very, very persuasive, very good at getting people to stay a little bit longer, even if they felt they wanted to run away. And then the person starts to go through a transformation. It's a very fascinating thing to watch. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a fair bit of time, but gradually, the hair gets cut. Maybe they become long pants instead. The person starts wearing a kippah, and eventually starts wearing tzitzis. And 2 years down the road, the person's religious. The person's keeping Shabbos. He's doing what he's supposed to. He's growing. He's learning Torah, Daf Yomi. 5 years down the road, he's got smicha. Maybe 10 years down the road, he's teaching Torah. And you would never know this person once was a Baal Tshuva, except for the fact he can't speak Hebrew that well. And it's, what happened? People who knew this person, what happened? It is a simple case of the person coming in, having their aleph resuscitated by Torah, by mitzvahs. It grew, it expanded. And as it did, it was mashpia. It influenced the goof, the dam, the dalet mem, right? Until eventually the person became more shalem, and they could listen to Torah and learn from Torah and believe in God. And they eventually bought into the lifestyle. Not because they were manipulated, certainly not because they were brainwashed, that's for sure. But because their aleph expanded. It's very hard to relate to spiritual growth before it happens. So it's a step-by-step process. You can't come to say to somebody, in a year from now, You stay here, you'll be religious and you'll love it. No way. The person runs away. You say, come for one class, come for a Shabbos and see how you like it. They come for a second Shabbos and a third Shabbos and on their own. Because what happens as they keep Shabbos, as they enjoy Shabbos, as they enjoy a class, as they enjoy Purim, as they learn something, an idea, it expands the Aleph. And as the Aleph gets bigger, eventually it matches the Daled Mem and the person becomes Ruchani, spiritual. But here's the beautiful thing, is that not only is that the case, that the person becomes more shalem, and therefore more whole, and able to fulfill their potential more, but the gematria of the word itself, when you add the Aleph to the Daled Mem, equals the gematria of the word Geula, redemption. The gematria of Adam and the gematria of Geula are exactly the same thing. And you know why? Because and this is the chiddush. This is the part that we seem to be missing. The part that generations have missed for the longest time. We tried to bring about physical Geula. We fight for our rights. We want to build the Beis Hamikdash 100%. And we want to change the politics and go, and do whatever we can to, all the physical stuff, 100%. But Hashem says the physical part follows the spiritual. When a person is able to achieve the balance of the Aleph and the Daled Mem, they become an Adam, Mimela, automatically the physical redemption follows. And we actually see this in Mitzrayim. Because when it came time to leave Egypt, the Jewish people just walked out. They didn't fight. They didn't even need a miracle anymore. Once the last plague took place and killed the firstborn, and the Jewish people became so convinced about the Kodesh Baruch Hu's hashgacha that they were able to be real with him emotionally, not just intellectually, but emotionally. And their heart was there. They could feel it. When you daven, the same thing. It's a whole different experience. I mean, personally, this is what I found one of the best advantages, if you can call it. I miss shul. I miss davening minyan. But one thing I've noticed when I've been home is that being home, I'm able to go at my pace, daven the words at the rate I can to do what? Not just not mumble and stumble, which I will do if I go too fast, but to think about what this word's supposed to mean to me, what it means to Kodesh Baruch Hu, and then the next one, and then the next one. And all of a sudden, this emotion wells up. Literally, I'm amazed. I've seen it before. I'm not sure Yom Kippur, but not to such an extent, because I'm still in shul at those times. It's still distracting. But it's like just somehow, just by saying the word slowly, it's almost like the word itself is the goof, and I'm adding the soul to it. I don't get a chance to do that in Shachris, Mincha, and even on Shabbos. It goes too fast for me to do that. So I'm basically happy with the fact that I got to say all the words. So I try to have a little bit more kavana, try to work my way through it, but not like it has been over the last little while. And almost you can hear Kodesh Baruch Hu saying, something. It says in Tehillim, the karbanos of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, which tefillah replaces, the sacrifice of a Kodesh Baruch Hu is a broken heart, a broken spirit. So the last while has been the Yetzer Hara's world. It's the Gashmis that has come into the world. And again, I'm not advocating leaving it all behind. Listen, we're taking advantage of technology right now. We're able to use it in a way to keep our lifestyle going. We're able to order food online, have it delivered. We're able to, the technology is wonderful. But to what end, right? We have to realign ourselves. The Haggadah frees us because it comes along and tells us, the program that it presents to us comes to tell us the exact same thing that the coronavirus is telling us right now at the same time. Basically, step back from life, right? Stop being so distracted. Stop being carried by the world around you. Listen to yourself, think. Hear yourself. Know yourself. And you have to go into isolation. I mean, this is what the great rabbis did. They would go to the forests and they would meditate. And they would think and give themselves time to be able to understand what's going through their head. Because this component is absolutely crucial, not just for achieving personal freedom, not just for achieving national redemption, but for the most important thing of all. Because as it says, on the luchas itself, on the tablets, the 10 Commandments that Moshe came down with, the stone tablets, it says the freedom is engraved on these. Al tikrei charus ala cherus. Charus means engraved. The 10 Commandments are engraved on the luchas, on the tablets. And the rabbis play on the word charus and change the vowels to become cherus, to mean freedom. The freedom is engraved on these tablets. Wow, how is that possible? 613 mitzvahs. Okay, so you don't have to do them all, because some are for Kohanim and some for Levium, but still there's a lot of mitzvahs left over for every person to do, and it seems to be, so enslaving. No, on the contrary, because freedom is freedom. One thing is freedom. What is that? Freedom from the Yetzer Hara. If you want to draw the jail cell that we all live within, it's the Yetzer Hara. It's that thing that commands us and compels us to do things. Well, the way my Rosh HaShavua used to sum it up: do what you want, not what you feel. Well, what do you mean? Well, I want to get up on time for minyan. I feel like sleeping in. What do? So I rationalize. That's, hit the snooze button. I think the other day I broke the Guinness Book of World Record for how many times a person hit the snooze button in the course of an hour. I was like, another time. I wanted to get. Why did I set it for that time? Because I wanted to get up. The night before I went to bed, I wanted to get up at that time. That's the best time for me to get up. The next morning, it felt like there was a huge load on my back, keeping me in bed. So I can't get up. So I got to hit the snooze button again, and I feel like sleeping in. So let's just, we don't have a lot of time left. Let's just take a look at how the Haggadah does it a bit, basically. And the rest you can do for yourselves. The rest you can, maybe we'll continue with this at some point in the near future. But in the meantime, this is the overall structure as you approach it, the Seder. The first thing we start off with, even by Jewish standards, it's an unusual thing. We stand there and we actually sing the table of contents. Kadesh, or the kids do, the whole family does. It's a lot of fun. You come home at Kiddush and then you sing the table of contents. Why are we singing the table of contents? Or why is the whole thing called Seder in the first place? So the Gemara says, when defining the Jewish people, the Gemara says the following thing. The Gemara says that when Hashem made Maaseh Bereshis, he took the chaos that was there and he brought order to the world. That's what he did. Hashem took the chaos. He could have begun a world with complete Seder. He didn't have to begin with chaos. We who want to bake a cake have to first start with a balagan. Take the flour with the eggs, the water, put the oil, put it all into the, mix it around, and eventually put the oven, you get a beautiful cake. Because Baruch Hu could start clearly, without a problem, with a perfect world from scratch, from the beginning. So why did it begin the world with chaos instead? Because he wanted to show us what we're supposed to do with our intelligence, with our life. A Tzelem Elokim is somebody who brings Seder to chaos. That's what's supposed to happen. A Tzelem Elokim is somebody who brings Seder to chaos. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim to do exactly that. Take a look at the world around us. The world is in chaos. What does chaos mean? It doesn't mean that everyone's running red lights necessarily, or cheating on their tax forms, or that there's riots taking place in the street. That's extreme chaos. Because Baruch Hu told Maaseh Bereshis, if the Jewish people accept Torah 2,440 years from now at Mount Sinai, then you have reshus to continue. You can continue. The world can go on and have kiyum. If the Jewish people do not accept Torah, you are hereby commanded to go back to null and void once again. So the Gemara says the whole Seder of the world depends upon the Jewish people. Because if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. And we saw, 70, 80 years ago, how much the world can sink into chaos once again. And here's the bad news. The bad news is when that happens, the Jewish people are not able to say, well, I'll go someplace else. No, it somehow comes after us. It chases us because our job, we're the ones, that's our job. So we begin by singing the table of contents to tell every single Jew, do not forget the reason why I turned the world upside down, entered into man's history, and perform miracles, which I prefer not to do because it takes away free will. And free will is where it's at. Is because I want somebody to be my partner in my celebrations to bring Seder to creation. So we make a Seder once a year to remind ourselves. That's why we were taken out. That's part of the responsibility. That's what an Aleph does. That's what an Adam does. An Adam who takes responsibility, an Adam Shalom, a complete person. In fact, it's one of the greatest tests that where a person's holding in terms of the balance of the Aleph and the Dalet Mem, is whether or not you are somebody who cares about Seder and tries to bring it to the world in whatever capacity you can. It could be that you are literally out there trying to bring Seder, or it could be that someone's sponsoring Torah, or it could be that someone writes a book. Whatever it is to add whatever element you can put into the world to increase the Seder of Ma'aseh Bereshis. You are a shoot of a partner with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and you are fulfilling the purpose of your own personal life, becoming more of an Adam in the process, and fulfilling the reason why Kodesh Baruch Hu took us to Mitzrayim in the first place. The second thing we go to is Kaddish, right? Kaddish, Kiddush, this is essential. I mean, the Jewish people, we make Kiddush Friday night and Havdalah Motzi Shabbos. So Gemara asks the question, why is the mitzvah of Havdalah in the brocha of the Shemona Esrei, Afatachon Ladam Das? You give man knowledge. Why we make Havdalah Motzi Shabbos there? And the Gemara answers, because it takes das, certain godly knowledge to be able to distinguish. The Sforno says that when Hashem made man, he made man B'Tselem Elokim. And he asked the question, why B'Tselem Elokim? Not B'Tselem Shekai, or B'Tselem Havoya, whatever other name Hashem might go by. Why Dafka? Why specifically Elokim? So he says, because Elokim is a term that denotes intellectual process. And Elokim is a term also used for a judge. A judge is somebody who has to weigh things and discern truth and use their seichel, right? The Maharal constantly speaks about the idea of being nivdal, with the seichel, with the idea of das. Shlomo HaMelech said, if you pursue it like money and buried treasures, then das Elokim you will find. Telling us it's the most important thing of all. You have to want it. The same way you would want the gashmis, the money and the buried treasures, you have to want this das. So we begin with Kiddush and Kaddish. The biggest problem the world has today is all in the area of das. For those who know me from the past and things I've spoken about, how the internet today represents probably the best example of a tree of knowledge of good and evil, the best one in the last almost 6,000 years. We have super information highways. This has been called the generation of knowledge because it's all about das, and it's not a coincidence that at the end of history, like bookends, the issue again is das. Eitza das tova ra. So we begin with Kaddish. We start off with Kaddish, make Kiddush, not just because that's when we begin a holiday. Specifically, the Seder is to tell us you have to be a bar das. You have to be someone who thinks. Don't simply accept information face value. Think deeply. The Rambam says a very interesting thing. He says that a tinik v'nishba, somebody who was raised as a Gentile, not knowing they were Jewish, and then finds out one day that they are, and immediately says, well, if I'm Jewish, let me go accept the Torah. It changes their life on a dime and becomes Torah observant, just like that. Still has to bring a korban chatos, a sin offering, for the Shabbos as it's broke. It's not fair. He's a hero. He could have said, I've been not Jewish until now. Why should I start at this stage of my life? He's absolutely a hero. He found his religion. He came back to what he's supposed to do. Why would he bring a sin offering? So the Rambam says a very interesting thing. Because Baruch Hu says, what took you so long? What took you so long? I gave you a brain. You should have worked it out for yourself. You should have realized a long time ago what the truth was. Forget about being a tinik v'nishba. Just what's the emes? What's the truth? Be a truth seeker. So a person says to Hashem, he goes to Shemaim, and they say, Hashem says, what do you have to say for yourself? He says, well, I became a Baal Tshuva at the age of 22, right? I didn't have to. I could easily have continued on with my secular life and had a great secular life, and I could have been a businessman, a multimillionaire, and I gave it all up for you, Kosh Baruch Hu. And Baruch Hu says, yeah, really? Age of 22? So yeah, 22. So let me show you something. He shows the person their past life. Hashem was talking to them at the age of 10 and 11 and 12 and 15 and 16. And if the person simply thought into what they were doing and used their brain that they were given, you discover truth. You not only discover truth, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps you as well. Because once HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that a person wants to know the emes, they're prepared to go the full distance to get to the bottom line, to get that truth, he will help them. He will make it available. He'll have them meet the right people. The right sefer will show up in their life, the right book, the right program, the right video, whatever it might be that the person needs to go the next stage in their truth seeking. Hashem will help that person out once he sees the person is interested in being a thinker. And that's us. The Kadesh, the idea of separation, distinguishing, the world doesn't do that. They clump things together and they make it very difficult for people to understand what it is that what we're supposed to be doing in life. Urchatz, right? That's, we wash our hands because it's a zecher, it's a reminder in the times of the temple that you could not, we had to maintain certain levels of spiritual purity. So if you wanted to eat a wet vegetable or wet fruit, you had to wash your hands first. Today, it's a tradition. We do it at the Seder specifically to remind us what it was like in times of the temple and also to prepare us for the time the temple will come back as well, right? But this is talking about Tumah B'Tahara, spiritual purity. It's a level up. The first level a person has to reach is the idea of being, he's Mekadosh himself. You use your brain to make the distinctions, to pursue truth, to separate yourself out from those who try to lead a misleading life. But there's still a level above that. That's when a person purifies himself. A person goes one level higher, meaning that they begin to only partake of the world in such a way that it enhances their level of holiness so they can better relate to God. If you want to be with God, you have to be like God. That's the rule. He has a lot of rechmanis. He knows where we're coming from. He knows the basis of a person's soul. He knows our strengths and he knows our weaknesses. But we have to as well, and we have to use them to our advantage. So Urchatz is saying you have to make an effort. You have to try to live as spiritually, life as possible, right? However you can do that. Okay. Then moving on to Karpas, right? The Karpas itself is a remez to, first of all, the 600,000. We saw the word, in reverse. The sin, the stomach becomes 60,000 myriad, 60 myriads, which is 600,000 who suffered Mitzrayim and the embitterment, the salt water, and all that. Because basically, you have to know where you're coming from. One of the we're on a time soon, so just jump to this basically. But the evil son asks the question, Ma havoda azos lechem? See the Korban Pesach. He's seeing the Jewish people offer a Paschal offering, a Pesach offering. And he says, what does this mean, to you? And the Haggadah says, lechem v'lo lo, right? To you, but not to him. He said, I want nothing to do with this. A good barbecue, I love it, fantastic. You want to tell me you're making a barbecue to enhance the yontif? No problem with that one. But the Korban Pesach is a Korban Pesach. I'm not saying it wasn't important once upon a time. I'm not saying that back in Mitzrayim, when the Jewish people had to make a distinction between themselves and the Egyptians by taking the Egyptian god and walking through the streets and tying to the bedpost and eventually sacrificing it to Hashem, and that distinguished them from the people around them and showed them to be worthy of redemption. I'm not saying it wasn't important then, but today, who worships a goat? Who worships a lamb? I mean, some weird tribe someplace in the world, but no one shecht a dollar bill. I hear it, right? You want to shecht your new car? Fine. That's where the world might, throw their worship today. But a Korban Pesach. So the Brisker Rav says a very interesting thing. He says that when the Haggadah says lechem v'lo lo, right? To you it matters something, but not to him. He's not talking about himself. What does this matter to you? Because it matters to you, but not to him. That's what he's saying. He's saying, don't try to convince me that this mitzvah makes a difference to God. Because like I said before, no one worships it. I mean, you could be a loyal Jew and not have to do Korban Pesach because, we don't worship that anymore. So why is it so important? And we say to the Russia a very interesting thing. The Gemara says that you should always, the karev with your right hand, push up with the left hand. It kind of balance. Elisha pushed up Gehazi with two hands, and he lost him. He lost it. He left Yiddishkeit altogether. Became a Russian in the end. So the Gemara says it's very important to balance it out. And here with this young man, for all intents and purposes, he's sitting at the Seder table. He's not in the streets someplace. He's not downtown running around the streets. He's at the Seder table. That counts for something, no? And he's asking a question. Fine, he's coming from the wrong direction, but still he's there. Doesn't count for something? And we say, Hakesh Shenavi, to break his teeth. And then we add something else that always kind of like threw me off and made me think. And you tell him that had you been there in Mitzrayim, you wouldn't have gone out. You would have been part of the 4/5 who died in the plague of darkness. How do you know? How do you know? Is it sour grapes? You just bash him and say, something? Not only do I not like your question, not only are you insolent, not only are you, maybe even, and if you chorus, you're a heretic to some degree, but had you been in Mitzrayim, we would have left you behind. Where's that coming from? Obviously, this is the Haggadah, not some family meal that people just happen to record what's going on. Haggadah is saying something. Haggadah is saying what makes the Russia unique, what makes his question matter so much is because that's the question the 4/5 asked as well. And that's what they got stuck behind. The Haggadah is saying to anybody who has a question, and make no mistake about it, everybody has all four sons inside of them. We start off as a Tam. We move on to Enodil Sha'ol as we get older. We have a part of our life where we're a Chacham, People want to learn, but want to know until they discover the world outside, and then we struggle to not become a Russia in the end. It's all inside of us too. There's the four sons and that's it. No, it's in the inside too. And the Haggadah is saying to us that if you want to avoid the Russia, and if the Russia is the Russia, he's in Galus. He's in exile. He may think he's a free man by throwing out the yoke of Torah. He may think he can do whatever he wants and doesn't care about God, but he's really enslaved because you know why? You know who's running his life? The Yetzer Hara is running his life. He's not in charge. He's not the Balabayas. He's not the one who's calling the shots. His Yetzer Hara is. He's a yes man. And the greatest act is how the Yetzer Hara is able to convince you it's you, because he lives inside. Once upon a time, it was the snake, right? Who said that? The snake said that. You can point him out, and, identify him, and stay, stand away. But not today. Today, he's inside of us. Shares the same brain, same vocal cords. Get confused. We think it's us. And because we think it's us, and we stand by like a Jewish history, look what we have become. I mean, it's like 13 million people in the world today, 13 million Jews in the world today, approximately, and less than half are religious. Of the half that are religious, less than half probably doing exactly right. Of the half, where are we holding today? Where are we connecting? We're all over the place. The Sahara has infected, has infiltrated our camp as well, always has. That's not the issue. Once upon a time, we knew what it was. There's a famous story of the Chafetz Chaim. One day he got up early in the morning, in his 80s, and his Yetzer Hara said to him, what are you doing up so early, old man? Right? Surely after all these years of getting up so early in the morning, you're pati, you don't have to get up anymore. Give yourself a break. Take a vacation. And the Chafetz Chaim answered back and said, if you're up this early in the morning, there's no reason why I shouldn't be up this early in the morning. A little story, cute little story, but these little stories have a lot of meaning. A lot of, in that little story is the whole Haggadah wrapped up. Is our whole situation, our whole crisis wrapped up. The king is coming. You got to think about that. There's a God who one day, we say it in Aleinu, It's got to be more than lip service. There's going to come a time when he's going to become king over the whole world. No more atheism, no more agnosticism. What does that mean? What does it mean God's going to become king over the whole world? He's going to actually be here. And we're going to be able to, it'll be palpable. And on that day, he will be one and his name will be one. Well, what does it mean? It means that when you do a mitzvah, your mind is not over there while your body is doing the mitzvah over here. It means that when you're doing the Haggadah, you're not just simply having a good experience, you're reliving it as if you too left Mitzrayim. It means you're so real and so connected to Kadosh Baruch Hu, to the whole process, that it changes you. It makes you a freer person, because only a free person can connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu. When the Haggadah says or teaches, and the Maharal emphasizes, that only a poor person is a free person, it means to say, not, well, use one example. The Gemara says, Yehuda Nasi died. Before he died, he held up his hand and he said, it's known in Shemayim that even my smallest finger did not benefit from this world. He was a wealthy man who had to dress well in his position and eat nice foods. So what is he talking? Is he lying, God forbid? Or telling the truth? Tell the truth. Because he was saying, no matter what I had, no matter what Hashem blessed me with, no matter what I was able to enjoy, no matter what I was able to pursue and actually achieve physically, it was never the goal itself. It was a means to an end. If we do anything at all, this year, as we sit down to make a Seder like none other in most of our lifetime, at least, as we have to confront the reality of a bared down Seder, missing so many things we're used to having on a regular basis. Family that we're supposed to be here, not here right now. News of the death of important people and everybody who's important to us, who may have passed away because of this or other illnesses, people who are unwell, who are going to miss us because they are not well at this point in time. As we have to deal with the angel of death, so to speak, outside around us, forcing us back into our houses. We shouldn't go out and be vulnerable to attacking. As we actually do that, this is the opportunity for the first time in a long time that the Seder and Haggadah should be able to have the proper impact on us it was meant to have by all the rabbis who were involved in compiling in the first place. It goes back to the original experience. We should merit now, soon, in our time, quickly, not only a complete healing of the world and the Jewish people, that we can once again go about our fulfillment of mitzvahs in the way that the Torah is prescribed and Halacha speaks about. And then we should have the joy of performing those mitzvahs. We should merit to mekabel Pnei Mashiach in a peaceful way, not through war, not through suffering. To welcome our King, Kadosh Baruch Hu, into the world with open arms and a heart of flesh. That should be ours this year. The starting point is approaching the Haggadah and the Seder in that manner. Work on the Aleph. The Dalet Mem, that we have, Baruch Hashem. Our generation has been very fortunate in so many different ways to develop that. It's the Aleph we have to develop. We have to put the soul back into our mitzvahs, back into our tefillah, back into our connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu. We do that, not only do we achieve personal freedom, because a person can achieve freedom ahead of the rest of the nation, but we help Klal Yisrael as a whole to achieve chaos like that and bring the ultimate tikkun to the world. Thank you very much for taking the time to come this evening to be here, and I hope that your cleaning will finish on time without stress and pressure, and that there's still time that this Pesach B'ezras Hashem to be the one that we help it to be. Hag Kosher Sameach.
HaShavua, Rabbi.